Earlier this week, Republican Congressman Jack Kingston, who supports holding a vote, told the New York Times why he thinks lawmakers are reluctant to do so. Quote, "A lot of people would like to stay on the sideline and say, just bomb the place and tell us about it later. It's an election year. A lot of Democrats don't know how it would play in their party, and Republicans don't want to change anything. We like the path we're on now. We can denounce it if it goes bad and praise it if it goes well and ask, what took him so long?" And joining me now is Congressman Jack Kingston, Republican of Georgia. Congressman, do you think that's still the prevailing mood inside Congress as they discuss the possibility of a vote?
Chris, I think that the president did a lot last night and has done a lot in the last 24 or 48 hours to change that mood. I do believe that there are members in both parties who would rather avoid a vote, and some of it's for political reasons, and some of it's just because, you know, you're darned if you do and darned if you don't when it comes to the Middle East. We get it wrong so many times over there. But I think that now the president would find a lot of allies in both parties who probably would welcome a vote and support a vote. And I think that the advantage to the president, of course, he mentioned it last night, it would show that we are united, but it would also put more eyes on the plan, because one of the things that we have learned in a hearing today, a briefing, is that the airstrikes and the training will not be enough, that we are going to have coalition forces that step up and fill in the gap and squeeze ISIS. And I don't think if we're not going to have troops on the ground, we're not going to be able to have that happen. And I think most of us are saying, well, we've got to get our coalition partners to have equal skin in the game, which may mean troops and definitely means money.
So do you agree with some fellow Republicans who are calling openly for ground troops, at least not taking ground troops off the table, or sending in combat troops, or even your colleague, Mr. Fleming, who basically says we should just be declaring all-out war, just go in there?
Well, I think that to put it on the table is appropriate when you look at the task that's in front of us. And I'll say this, Chris, you know, President Clinton effectively used airstrikes in Bosnia. But in so many other cases, airstrikes aren't sufficient. And we know training troops over there sometimes doesn't work. One of the statistics that we heard today is that we have trained at 938,000 Iraqis, and at a cost of about $20 billion, and yet look what's happened to them.
Right.
Really nothing.
So just to be clear, so you think, you agree with Paul that ground troops should not be taken off the table? That should be a possibility in the future?
I think it should be a possibility, and I also think there's a strategic reason you want to leave it on the table, because we don't want to broadcast to our enemies everything that we're thinking.
Would you then support some kind of authorization that would grant the possibility of American ground troops back in Iraq or in Syria as a matter of a sort of authorization for military force?
I think that the way the military force resolutions are worded gives the president broad authority, as it should give the president broad authority to do what needs to be done to accomplish the mission. And in this case, the mission, as I understand it, is to disrupt, degrade, and to defeat ISIS. And in order to accomplish that mission, he's got to have a lot of flexibility.
Can I ask you an honest question here, Congressman? Frank question. Do you ever, on these matters, and when you're talking about this massively complicated situation, do you ever think to yourself, I have no idea? Like, I have no idea, and none of us have any idea walking around these halls of Congress?
I think that's a very good question, Chris. I think anybody who has seriously been involved and looked at the Middle East stuff has to have that moment, or those moments, when you're dealing with it, because we seem to get it wrong. You know, Colin Powell said very famously 13 years ago, if you break it, you own it.
Yeah.
And, you know, when he said it, he wasn't the most popular guy in town, and yet here we are. And that's why the president, by the way, is saying he doesn't need further authorization from Congress, because the 2002 authorization is almost where we are today.
Congressman Jack Kingston, I appreciate you coming on tonight, Congressman.